Thank you for joining us today. My name is Barb Rawson. I am with Kirkwood Training, and we would love to be your training partner. If you would like to learn more about Helena, the results-based listening topic, or any other training topics, please look up our information on the first slide and the last slide today. And now I will turn it over to our expert, Helena Long.
Great. Thank you, Barb. And I want to say thank you for joining us this morning. This is such a timely topic, isn't it? Listening skills, it's always a challenge, but especially now when so much of our communication is virtual. And that just adds another level of complexity and difficulty to this task of listening. Here at Jet Engineering, I get to spend half my time conducting training sessions like this one and with Kirkwood. The other half of my time, I spend heading up the HR department. And a great example of some listening challenges occurred last week. We're in the process of interviewing candidates to add an engineer to our team. And I had a candidate, I asked the question, so where do you see yourself 5 years from now? And his response very quickly was, my greatest weakness is listening. And I thought, oh, yes, it is. Not only did he not listen, he demonstrated that he wasn't listening. So it just shows it can be a real challenge for all of us, actually. So in this session, we want to talk about some tips and techniques that can help us all be more effective listeners. I want to share with you a model for effective communication. It's a simple model, but I like it because it is simple and it's one that I can actually visualize and it can help me be more effective when I'm listening to others. Also, we're going to explore the power of perceptions and see how much of a barrier that can be to effective listening and talk about how we can better address that barrier. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about emotional intelligence and specifically emotional hijacking and how that can also be a powerful barrier, and we'll talk about some techniques to help us address emotional hijacking. So I want to start with this quote from George Bernard Shaw. It's one of my favorites. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. As you read that quote, I want you to think about an application for that in your life. Sad to say, I can think of a lot of applications in mine. As recently as the end of February, I was scheduling a meeting with a colleague, and I suggested that we meet at Dash Coffee Shop in downtown Cedar Rapids at 10 a.m. She agreed, so I arrived at 9:55. I had my coffee. I was all ready for the meeting. 10 o'clock came, 10:05 came, 10:10 came, and she was still not there. So I texted her and said, hey, I'm at Dash. And she texted back and said, I'm at Dash and I don't see you. And that's when I learned that Dash had opened a second location at the Veritas Church in downtown Cedar Rapids. So again, I thought I was very clear in communicating a place to meet. She thought she was very clear and we miscommunicated. So let's look at why that happens sometimes. And so I want to share this communications model with you. It starts with the sender. So as the sender, I have a message I want to communicate. So I encode my message. Or in other words, I package my message. I decide what words I want to use and if I'm going to use charts or graphs or pictures. But I package that message and then I transmit that message. And I can do that by either talking with you face-to-face, calling you on the phone, a text message, an email. And then as the receiver, you decode that message or you interpret the message that I sent. And usually we stop there, right? Because I'm sure I was so clear in what I said that I'm sure you got it, right? But the last step in that process, which is probably the most important step, is feedback, where ideally the receiver says something like, let me make sure I understand. What you're telling me is this. And the reason that is so important is because in the middle of this entire process is filters. Filters would be like our perspective or our frame of reference. And our filters are formed by things such as our age, our gender, our education, our religion, our value system. Basically everything that makes us us creates filters in our perspective. So what that means is maybe I was very clear in what I said, what I communicated from my perspective, but as it went through your filtering process, when you interpreted that, it may have had a very different meaning to you. A really simple example of this is if you go down south and you order a Coke. If you haven't already picked up my southern accent, I'm originally from Tennessee. And if you go to Tennessee and you order a Coke, do you know what they will say? Do you know what they will ask you? If you do, let me ask you to type it in the chat. Barb, let me know if anyone types something. But I'd like to hear from you. What do you think they would ask you if you go to Tennessee and you order a Coke? What do you think? Does anybody have a good idea?
Yep, we've got a couple comments in the chat. What kind of Coke do you want? What flavor?
Yep. They're going to ask you what kind. And that's when you order your Sprite. Because down south, all soft drinks are called Cokes. Where up here, we would call a soft drink a pop or a soda. When you go down south, they always say Coke. Everything's a Coke down there. So again, I thought it was very clear, but it may not be when it's interpreted through filters. So how do we use this model? This is as the sender. I want to try to understand my receiver. I want to anticipate what his or her filters might be so that as I package my message, they get through those filters. And so we have complete communication. By the same token, if I'm the receiver, I want to try to understand the perspective or the filters of the sender so that I can better put myself in his or her shoes and better really understand the message that they're trying to communicate to me. So I like this model because I can visualize this when I am communicating with someone. Let's explore further filters and look at some types of filters. The first type is semantics. That just means words. Words can have very different meanings. My example of a Coke. It can have a different meaning if you're here in Iowa or if you are in Tennessee. A second filter is emotions. This is actually the most powerful filter. When someone is getting emotional, communication just stops. And so, in fact, if you're having a conversation with someone and they start to get emotional, sometimes the best solution at that point is to just delay the conversation, postpone any future discussion until the emotions can die down a little bit. The third filter is attitude. Our attitudes are fueled by our emotions, and our attitudes become our belief systems, our paradigms. And again, they're pretty solid. That's also a powerful filter. Expectations. That can be a filter in that we already expect certain messages to be communicated by someone because of their role. Let me give you an example. I worked with Rockwell for about 10 years, and every week we would have I would walk around the plant with the president. This was his weekly walk around. And one day the VP of operations was with us and we were walking through the factory, and the president made the off-the-cuff comment that looked a little dreary in here. Maybe we should paint it yellow. And that was all he said. The next week on our walk around, it's painted yellow. And the president said, oh, well, this is nice. And he looked at the VP of operations and said, why did you paint it yellow? And he said, well, sir, last week you told me to paint it yellow. And he said, oh, I did. And did not even remember making the off-the-cuff comment. However, because he was the president, what the VP heard was a directive to go paint the facility yellow. So again, role expectations can really filter how we hear a message. Personality can be a powerful filter as well. As a quick summary, research tells us there are 4 different personality types. The first type is a driver. This is a personality type that values results, and they want to just get to the point. They're very direct in their communication. The second type would be the expressive. This person also values getting results, but they value working with other people to do it. They like brainstorming and collaborating and having fun while they do it. And so they like to talk a lot, and they're very verbose, talk a lot. The third type would be your amiables. These folks value relationships. They value peace and harmony. They want to avoid conflict. They're typically quiet in their speech, and they may often not speak up, especially if they disagree. And then the fourth type would be your analyticals. These folks value being right. They're very logical and systematic in their thought process and in their speech, very detailed. So each of the 4 types has a very different communication style. And one style can actually cause stress in another style. So when you think about filters and you've got different styles working together and communicating with each other, sometimes this can just create barriers. So you've got several examples here of filters. So just to go back to our communications model, this would say, as the sender, I want to try to understand how each of those filters can impact how the receiver might hear what I am trying to communicate, because that could then affect how I package that message. Another filter can be our perceptions. So let's look at perceptions. I've got 4 examples here, and I want to ask you to look at each of these pictures. The one on the upper left, hopefully you see the word good. Also, do you see the word evil? We have the word on the upper right, optical. Do you also see the word illusion? Lower left, we have the word teach, but in sort of a reflection, we have the word learn. And in the lower right, we have the word me, but also hopefully you can see the word you in there. So 4 quick examples of how we may see different things when we look at the same object. So perception. Perception is the processing, interpreting, selection, and organizing of information. Because of our perceptions, we are able to process a lot of information very quickly. However, what that also can mean is that sometimes the same message can be interpreted differently by different people. I want to show you a little video clip here. Hopefully everyone can see the giraffes. Now as the camera turns, we should see an elephant. I think this is really cool. Now we're going to go back to again see the view of the 2 giraffes. I think this is so cool. I hope everyone now is going, wow. So, perception. We don't always hear or see the same things as our receiver or the other party, but we think we do. We could always think we're on the same, or often think we're on the same wavelength, and we're not. 2 people can be the same event and have different conclusions. And we are set up to have those different perceptions because of our filters. A real key here is that it's important to understand another person can perceive something very differently than we do, but they can still be correct. And so that says when we are listening to someone, we need to hear with an open mind, and try to understand their perception, their filters, so we, again, can really understand the message that they're trying to communicate. I want to move us now to the topic of emotional intelligence and how that relates to listening. Let's start with the definition so we can make sure we're all on the same page with emotional intelligence. A formal definition is using your emotions intelligently to gain the performance you wish to see within yourself and to achieve interpersonal effectiveness with others. So what this means is I want to be aware of my emotions in the moment as they are occurring, because then I can be very deliberate about how I act on those emotions. I don't have to just react as I might be hardwired to do, but instead I can be deliberate and handle those emotions in a way that is aligned with my value system, how I want people to see me. Also, I can deliberately act on those emotions in a way to support relationships with others, so that I have a strengthened strengthen relationships, or that we can be more productive with each other as we are working together. One aspect of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, being aware of our feelings. So a question for you is, what ticks you off? What is something that when it occurs, you just immediately feel emotional about it? Angry, upset. Sort of like we've got a barometer and we go from 0 to 100 immediately when this happens. I'd like to ask you to type that in the chat. Let's get some examples here. I will share one for me. When I hear someone say, "It's not my job," that ticks me off. On a personal note, someone who cuts me off in traffic, that also can really tick me off. So Barb, are we getting any ideas in the chat here?
If someone says we can't do that, I'm bored. I like this one, slow walkers in the grocery store.
Oh, I like that one too.
When someone belittles someone else in front of others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or that's the way it's always been done.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. And then we tried that before and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Bullying.
Good one. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Gee, as Barbara's reading these, are you just already feeling yourself getting emotional? Like, wow, I want to go fix that. Right? It ticks us off. All right, so we want to be aware of that feeling, because that takes us to emotional hijacking. Let's talk about what emotional hijacking is. I see you hear something, and so then I tell myself a story about it. I'll use my example of someone saying, "That's not my job." When I hear that, I immediately think, okay, this person's lazy. They don't want to go above and beyond. They're not a good team player. And so the emotion that I feel is anger, frustration. And then how do I act? I might even say something inappropriate, or I just leave. I just may decide I don't even want to work with that person. When in reality, had I listened with an open mind, I may have heard, "That's not my job, but let me delegate some of my work to someone else so I can help you with this." But I'm not open to hearing that because I've been emotionally hijacked. When that happens, we're not listening. Again, that emotional filter comes up and we are not listening. I have a short video clip I want to show you. So I am going to change a setting here so you can hear it. All right.
Hey, everyone's eating tacos outside Bill's office.
Do you think that's some information I would like to know? I like tacos. You invited Eric? I thought Eric gave you the creeps. Oh. Yeah. Hey.
Don't be left behind.
AT&T.
The nation's fastest mobile broadband network is getting faster with 4G.
All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. I think that's kind of a cute little clip, but boy, does it ever illustrate being emotionally hijacked. So hopefully you can think of some examples where that has happened to you. And what we want to work on is how do we avoid that so that we can really make sure that we are listening. So 4 ways to avoid emotional hijacking. Pause, take a breath instead of just reacting. Secondly, seek to understand without judgment. I heard not long ago a phrase that I claim now as mine. I really hang on to this one, which is be curious, not furious. And that's really what number 2 is talking about. Ask for clarification because we may have misunderstood, or again, may not have been listening. And fourthly, I would say even delay the conversation. If we are feeling emotional, just postpone the conversation until you can come back and really listen to understand. All right, I want to move on to the last topic here, which is characteristics of effective listeners. I have a list here. I am sure that you have all seen this list before. This is the standard list. It has some verbal characteristics, verbal tactics, such as paraphrasing, not interrupting. It also has some nonverbals like making eye contact, head nods. These are all good, and I felt like I would disservice if I didn't put this list in a listening skills webinar. However, I'm going to tell you to sort of ignore this list. Some of you may be going, oh. However, if we are really, really listening to someone, then we don't need to pretend we're listening, right? We don't need to be thinking about doing these things because we're doing these things if we are really listening. The list I want to spend a few minutes on instead is this one. 10 ways to have a better conversation. Now, this is actually from Celeste Headley. But I think this is a great list. First of all, don't multitask. It is so easy to multitask when we are listening to someone. It's easy because our brains work at the rate of about 500 words a minute, but most people speak at the rate of 250 words a minute. Me being from Tennessee, it's about 150 words a minute. What that means is our brains have idle time where we can think about something else. And we don't want to do that. We want to stay focused. Don't pontificate. If our intent is to listen to someone and to understand, then we don't want to be talking. If we want to pontificate, start a blog. But don't pontificate. Thirdly, use open-ended questions. Get people talking about themselves. Everyone that you know will know something that you don't. Everyone that you meet will know something that you don't. I learned a long time ago, every single person has something really amazing about them. I want to find out what that is. I want to know what it is that makes you really amazing. And the only way I can figure that out or learn that is to ask you open-ended questions. Go with the flow. I'm going to share a different meaning with you for these words. What this means is, while we are listening to someone, we are going to have ideas or thoughts flow into our mind. Again, because we've got some idle time there. I'm going to tell you, go with the flow and let them flow right back out. Because we want to stay focused on the speaker. We want to listen. If you don't know, say that you don't know. Again, don't just talk to be talking. Don't equate your experience with theirs. It's never the same. When someone is telling you about something that happened to them, Don't take over the conversation and start talking about what happened to you. It's never the same. This is when we just need to listen, put ourselves in their shoes, and really understand the feeling they're trying to share with us. Try not to repeat yourself. That can just get boring. Stay out of the weeds. People don't want to know all of those nitty-gritty details. I'll go back to an interview we had last week, and a candidate just got into the weeds. And I was having a hard time getting him out. And I looked at some of the other interviewers on Zoom calls. We were all glazing over. That will just be boring. Stay out of the weeds. Listen, again, because of the idle time we have in our brains, we've got to go into a conversation with someone with the mindset of, I want to listen, and be committed to that. And number 10, be brief and get to the point, say what you need to say, but again, focus on the other person and really encourage them to be talking to you and listen to them. So I'm going to end with this thought. A good listener is one who helps us overhear ourselves. So hopefully today you got some tips and techniques and ideas, maybe a reminder of some things you already knew, but hopefully some things that can help us all be better listeners and help others overhear themselves. So again, as a sneak peek, Kirkwood is continuing to offer great training opportunities for us, and there is one coming up in October that I will be doing on building a culture of trust as part of their business partners program. So Barb, with that, that is everything that I had planned to cover today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Helena. Great information. I know I'm definitely going to apply some of that into my improved listening skills. So thank you so much. All of you that are still joining us, we did record the session today. We will be sending out Helena's handouts and the link to the recording within a week or so after the session. So again, thank you for joining us for the results-based listening webinar sponsored by Kirkwood Corporate Training. And if you would like to partner with us for your training needs, the contact information is there on the slide. So thank you, Helena.